Um, my name is Brendan Gordon. My current role is the Director of Business Development, and it's a dual role because I'm the lead innovation consultant for a consultancy agency based here in Limerick. I have two boys and a fiance, and last year, as the course is about to start, I was turning 40, and I had never been to university. I had no third level education, and I felt now was the time to tackle that bridge and get that academic chip off my shoulder.
So Brendan, you've undertaken a really specific project here for this program. Can you tell us a bit about it and why it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose about 6 or 7 years ago, I went to the States and I was trained by IDEO in design thinking. And when I came back, part of the certification process was I had to train at least 300 people, and we ended up training about 1,000. And this was in a large multinational tech company. So the project that I selected was actually driven by what we had learned in semester one. We were designing a makerspace for UCC, and accessibility for me was a linchpin of any environment that has to be designed. So when I chose this project, it was really about taking that to the next level. If we have the environment, how do we create the opportunities for people with illness, injury, or disability to really go out there and find a career and not be pigeonholed into what people think they can do?
Very, very interesting to know. And what did the project seek to achieve, Brendan? Let's say in advance of it, what would you have said success would be for this project?
At the very beginning, ideally, I partnered with an organization called Employability Limerick. And when we were looking at what they were doing and how they were doing it, their focus started off being on the brand and awareness and communication and coming, a bit more dressed, appropriate to deal with the business private sector. So at the start, success for us would have been very much, how do we come to the party dressed for the occasion, saying the right things, talking about outcomes from their perspective. But as the program evolved and I actually started to get into the research, we then looked at how the term people with disabilities was actually disabling them, and that we had to stop thinking about designing solutions for the disability and start thinking about designing opportunities for the person.
And Brendan, I've heard you speak about, the social model of disability and it being maybe a bit different to what you would have, or the way you'd have viewed disability before you undertook this project. Can you tell us a bit about that model?
Absolutely. I suppose, Paddy, yourself, as I was in semester two, I think I was about 6 weeks in, and I think I said to you in one of our classes, wouldn't it be great if I could schedule an epiphany? But unfortunately, that's not the case. So I came across this TED talk by a lady by the name of Stella Young. She's Australian, and she was talking about this topic known as inspiration porn, and it was the objectification of people with disabilities for those without. So we've all seen those, memes, a person running on prosthetic legs, what's your excuse is the tagline, or, a girl and she's painting a picture, but the brush is in her mouth because she doesn't have arms, what's your excuse, or just try. And as I was watching this, she touched on a topic called the social model of disability. And we have the medical model of disability, which was originated by the World Health Organization. And I noticed that the language was nuanced, but different enough that it mattered. So the social model of disability talks about how people are not disabled by their impairments or their diagnoses, but rather they're disabled by the environment around them. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to create a workshop for design thinking and the venue didn't have a ramp and there was a person that was participating in a wheelchair, that person has now been disabled by their environment rather than by their disability. So, and even the language that they use is nuanced in that it's disabled people. So it gets you to start a mindset change, a shift in how you think about things, rather than the old term of people with disabilities. Because if, like anything, if you're talking about such and such with this, you start to focus on the this rather than the person. and the solution and the design starts to stream towards that, as opposed to creating, an opportunity for everyone. And just one further example, and I won't take too long on it, but as I started to hone my research, and this is where ADR really started to come out and benefit me so much, was that what I learned was that in semester one, we were all about action and design. And the research did come into it, but it was more around supporting the methodology that we're using and creating a greater understanding. But with ADR, it's a completely different approach. So as I started to hone my research, especially around things like dyslexia and psychometric testing in recruitment, we found that was a barrier for my interviewees to secure employment. In fact, one of my interviewees went for a graduate program, didn't get in because they couldn't fulfill the psychometric testing requirements. And then 3 years later, went back to the company and was offered a position 2 levels higher and skipped. So we were like, oh my God. So then one of the solutions that we prototyped and then moved on to a prototype was taking a version of PDF Reader and a version of Parrot Scribe, where one reads out the document to you and one, you dictate to it and it records your voice. If you combine the two, that's a solution that would benefit everyone. Imagine never having to go to the tax office body and fill out a form again. You could just speak to it and the information will populate. So that's what the social model of disability really opened my eyes to. It's stop designing for the width and focus on designing for the person, because you can benefit a much broader spectrum of people if you adopt that mindset.
Very, very cool. And so you used a bit of terminology there. Maybe we'll come back around to some of those terms, Brendan. So what was, if you were to try and describe it for our audience, what was the key deliverable from your project, would you say?
There was a lot, to be honest, Paddy. We did so much. First of all, I have to recognize the team in employability. I mean, they were absolutely amazing. Their passion and drive drove me to do better, to research more. But I suppose some of the key deliverables were looking at their existing framework and then building in what they did, just because they loved their role. So they did a lot of post work that wasn't in their process, managing their clients and looking after them. And I felt they needed to get some recognition for that. And then they also wanted to engage a younger cohort of people. So we built in a pre-service. And then we looked at identifying supporting initiatives that would feed around into each one of those 7 stages. But I suppose the key deliverable out of the program was that, number one, we were able to now start looking at how we would message to other people within the community across Ireland of all the great work that was being done. We started to capture employer testimonials of what they call in research accommodations for people with disability, how that, what that meant in practical and real terms. Then we looked at connecting with clients themselves of employability and sharing their stories. For example, one gentleman who's actually, builds bikes for a company here in Ireland who's actually blind, who's visually impaired, and just his story and what he does and how he does it was fantastic. But then taking that 7-stage process and the supporting initiatives and actually in conjunction with a company who I can't name, unfortunately, because it's not public domain yet, but we secured a deal to build employability and information management system that would then feed into an app on their clients' phones. Because one of the bugbears for employability was their analytics, their interaction rates with their clients. So we took something that started out on paper and a whiteboard to documenting it to processes and procedures to give it some life and bring it into the real world, so to speak, and then to digitize it so that this is something now that can grow legs and go to all the employabilities in Ireland. It can go beyond Ireland, and they're no longer bound by geography, which I'm sure you've experienced. I've seen you a lot on LinkedIn, with all the different forums that you engage with, and it just makes for a wider conversation. And I suppose to finish it off, then there was, I think, 16 parallel initiatives for each of the stages, but a real sort of a bookend, I suppose, for the project was that they're actually going to set up a community of practice now, where that once a quarter they will engage with other stakeholders that we identified, and it's kind of like a lessons learned. What have you done? What's different? So they can start to learn from each other and really set up that out of the process, outside of that realm support network. And it just makes it hugely exciting for myself and the team.
Yeah. So that's very interesting, Brendan. So what I'm hearing is it's sort of the client is the person with the disability. What employability does then is works with employers to try and find appropriate positions for those clients. And what you've done is now, I suppose, looked at that process end to end, recognize that it consists of 7 key stages, and for each of those key stages you've broken it down into different aspects, and you've gone even further again in terms of actually solutioning that 7-stage process using a piece of technology, and that piece of technology now can also be rolled out to other employability offices. Brendan, how long did it take you to do this? It seems like a very sizable piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, it was really it was a difficult project, you know, if I'm being very honest. But I suppose just to clarify one thing, the information management system that would be managed by them and the supporting application, that's just a tool. That's not the win. The win is really those 16 supporting initiatives that work with that framework, because they're all new. And that's what I really admire about the team, is their courage in taking on so much, because they can see the value in it. But to answer your question, 3 months. So it was quite intense. But I think what enabled me to do so much in such a short space of time was the turning point from semester 1 to semester 2. So with the teaching staff, what we had learned about was design thinking in semester 1, where it was 80% problem analysis, 20% solution. And then there was an almost accelerated shift in our mindset and the tools that we were provided. So we looked at things like design sprints, prototyping, you know, ADR, advanced design research. And really what happened was that the teaching staff enabled us to move from this very much living in the problem world to getting out there and doing stuff and affecting real change. And it was all these different examples that were brought in. We had a load of guest speakers that were brought in to show us how it was done. So we had some really, really great reference points. And through our mentoring sessions then as well, what we found, myself and my project team found that was anytime we went down a rabbit hole, you know, yourself or Bryony or Fiona or Mike were there to kind of pull us back out of the weeds and say, you might be going a little bit off piste here, you know, you need to hone back on this. This is potentially where the nugget is. And, you know, design thinking is hugely exciting. And the course, you know, really, I think nearly everybody took a social project that they wanted to tackle because they were so passionate about it. And they could see the change that they could affect in such a short time. But I suppose just to end on the point is that the teaching staff, I'd more call them coaches, to be honest. Our coaches, really what they helped us to focus on was what we could get done in the time that we had available to us. And that really sort of solidified our minds on what our prototypes would be.
And I've also heard you, and you mentioned it again, Brendan, and I've heard you mention it previously as well, that the power of the team you put together outside of the program. So you did have all the support within the program, but you also put together a design team outside the program that would move this forward and move it forward at a rate of knots by the sound. Do you want to tell us just a bit about that team?
So as the team was built, then we knew how we could move forward. So we had our job coaches, our coordinators, our admins, and the team took to the project with open arms. You know, they were quite happy to take on responsibilities to satisfy the ethics of both the project for UCC and myself, obviously, and the NDA for employability. we created mediums. So how we would connect then to the clients was that the job coaches would do it. How we would connect to the employers would be that the coordinator would do it. So there was a medium between UCC, myself, and the key stakeholders, the people that would benefit from the change. And that really then enabled a flow of data and information back in. And I suppose my role in all that then was being the central point and trying to culminate the research side of it, as well as introducing them to design thinking. But that team was just fantastic in what they were able to do. You know, they really made the work not seem like work. I can't think of a more eloquent way to say it. But
And you know what I find really inspiring was the fact that people maybe get used to working very hierarchical, but what you were doing was bringing a whole new set and a new mindset into this organization. So you ended up maybe learning a lot about the likes, like you say, action design, research, design thinking, design sprints within the program. But you were then bringing those skills to this team and enabling and empowering them. I love that idea, that you're empowering them to start making decisions where before it was a process, was nearly making the decisions. What intrigues me as well, Brendan, you were working full time during this, and I know there's probably people listening here, that would be saying, is this a sort of a program I could do while I work full time? Have you any sort of tips or advice on how you made it work for you?
Yeah, the only way I was able to make, because as I said, I have a dual role. So I'm a director of business development, which, as you can imagine, involves a lot of getting out there, meeting people, lots of calls, Zooms, Teams, all that kind of good stuff. And then a lead innovation consultant. So I'd be running a lot of workshops as well, especially with my previous background in design thinking. So, that's quite a busy day job, as you can imagine yourself. But if I had my time back again, 100% I'd do this program again, because what this program has done for me has enabled me to take a step change in my understanding of innovation and design thinking. Like, we're very formalized in public consumption. Everyone thinks design thinking is 5 stages and that's it. And, you go through the stages. Again, they treat it like a process. Whereas with this, it's allowed me to see so much more. Like, I think embarrassingly, I put down a knowledge of design thinking advanced when I filled out my form. If I could go back in time and change that to novice, I would. So to make it work with the day job, what I found really useful was setting up the support mechanisms around the program. So in semester 1, we were put into groups. So every Sunday night, we would have an hour on Zoom or Teams where we get together as a team, and we would leverage off each other, assign accountability actions owners. Then 3 days later on Wednesday, we have an hour from 7 to 8, and we say, well, what did you do? Present what you did. And then Thursday evening, we'd use the time to hone and refine our work, and we'd present on Friday then to the rest of the cohort and the teaching team. So that for semester 1 was a real support in how we approached getting our initial project done. For semester 2, as we are talking about today, it was a lot more intensive in the approach and what we wanted to do, but that was self-inflicted because of the passion and I suppose the main anchor was I wanted to do something. I wanted to be able to turn around at the end of the project and say, for example, if I left this project and I went back to the day job and I never thought about it again, that it would be sustained, that it could stand on its own 2 feet and keep going. So all the time throughout the second semester, it was about having pulse checks with the team, with employability. This is where we are, this is what we're doing, this is what needs to happen next. So building a clear roadmap, and then using your time wisely. Like, if you have an hour for lunch, you'd have a half an hour quick pulse meeting with employability. You try and schedule at least an hour to 3 if you had the time in the evenings to look at maybe getting some of your research done and so on and so forth. And it's actually not a cumbersome ask. It's actually quite digestible. So if you're, something that's very important at the moment with COVID is getting out and exercising and your mental well-being. So, you can flick on a podcast, you can hear from the experts, and then if that piques your interest, you can search the academic paper, you know, jump right into it, get the reference. But it's about saving, really. It's taking little pieces and saving them over the course of the program. So, you know, at the end, you have this pot of knowledge that you can just pull from, and it's not in the last week you're writing like a banshee trying to get it all done in that time frame.
And Brendan, you know, I'm intrigued by something you've been saying as well. That like you had a background in design thinking. You studied one of the top, I suppose, recognized venues for learning design thinking, which was IDEO. So what was your expectation coming in? Because most people come in won't have that background in design thinking, and that's maybe a skill they're looking to acquire. What was your expectation coming into this program?
Well, I suppose for myself, like as I mentioned, I would have worked my way up. I would have started out in life driving a forklift, and then worked my way up through the organization, and then ultimately working towards being a director in a consultancy. So what I found was that I had a very practical knowledge. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, I have a bit of an academic chip on my shoulder. So I felt that in order to have credibility to stand with my peers, I needed to come onto this program. And I felt that this program, because it was this first year, I knew that those behind it would be throwing everything at the kitchen sink at it. You know, we'd be getting a good deep dive into as much information as possible. So I felt, you know, at the end of the program, I'd emerge with a good foundation to move forward with confidence and to speak with confidence and to be able to reference other people's work, what I had seen, what I had learned, and to really broaden my horizons. I got that in spades more.
And Brendan, you talk about maybe not having that maybe university level education prior to this, you know, and I have to also recognize, Brendan, I know you haven't mentioned it, but you were one of the award winners from your class, from your year this year. And I think it was pulling those strands together that you spoke about. I think it was D-Cubed in Action was the award you got for your contribution to D-Cubed in Action. That's bringing data, digital and design together. And I think it's a very good point as well. Obviously, Brendan, your cohort is the first cohort out of this program, but we're really fortunate to have people that have come through other programs with us previously coming in, talking to us, sharing their insights. But what's really exciting is hopefully, touch wood, you will now be the alumni who will be coming back next year talking about your experiences. And I'm just interested, and this is maybe a question, where to for Brendan from here? You know, obviously you feel you can develop these new capabilities. Are there types of initiatives you want to get involved in, etc., going forward? So where to from here for Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, like, not to sound corny, but the program has had a significant impact on my life. I'm actually staying with Employability past the program. So I'm going to continue working with them because I feel very passionate about seeing this through and helping them to, you know, bring this project to fruition. And I'm excited to see where they can take it. So that will continue on, I'm delighted to say. All the learning on the program, I think I now have a better understanding of what I can bring back to my own organization, but also in parallel now what I can use with our clients and leverage and build that out so that I have a much deeper understanding of how to see it from their point of view. I mean, one of the things I think that was really good for me was that in semester one, myself and my team, who were fantastic as well, you know, like Ali and Cara and Donica and Angela and Amy, we formed a really tight bond. So they're friendships for life. I mean, we still WhatsApp each other now, and even my semester two team were the exact same. So that's another piece that, you know, the program has given me that I never would have had before. But I suppose for myself, you know, I've got a keen interest in culture, in how people make decisions. So I would like to keep up that work, those social innovations, But also I think what's really been a turning point for me is now I'm kind of hungry to keep learning. So I was a bit apprehensive about going back to college. You're always anxious about the unknown and what you're not familiar with. But I think that the support mechanisms that we've had from UCC have been fantastic. Like the skill centre, the writing school, the teaching staff like yourself making time outside of hours to sit down with us and, talk through things that we were going through. So yeah, I definitely don't see this as being the end of my academic journey. I'd like to take this further. I'd like to study more with UCC, and hopefully continue to do more social innovation. I think that's important, because it would be an awful shame, I think, for me or any of my cohort to take all these fantastic skills and insights and knowledge that we've learned over the past 9 months and keep it to ourselves. I think the next thing that we have to think about is how do we disseminate this knowledge out to a wider audience, and even if it is only bringing it back to our own organization and our own clients. I mean, how they can do it too, and it's not so scary, and you can do it, and it's really just about getting in there, get your hands dirty, and just enjoy it. Just have a bit of fun.
I think that's inspiring, really, Brendan, and I love hearing the idea of the sustainability element, where you're saying it isn't just about us coming in and solving a problem in an organization, then running away again and let's say the solution falling apart. It's about really supporting these organizations to make long-term change, and I really like the idea that your engagement with employability is going to go forward. I also think it's a great endorsement for other employers or other organizations that want to get involved. These are the types of maybe projects we're interested in as well. I really like the idea, the call to action, that for anyone that feels they don't have maybe that educational attainment, it doesn't matter. You with programs like this, it's all about becoming something that you can becoming a better you. And I really like how you refer to that. So Brendan, again, thank you for the chance to this chat, and I'm sure we'll be in contact going forward as well.
One last thing I would finish on is I would encourage companies to contact UCC. I would really challenge them to think about, if they are dealing with COVID and, relaunching their business and thinking of the next iteration of their strategy, you really can't get a better resource than the people that are on this program, because they're hungry for change and impact and to do something. So I would urge companies, regardless of whether they're public or private sector, to get in contact. And look, you're getting a free resource, someone that's going to drive this forward, and they're being measured. So, if you want to expose yourself to design thinking in a low fidelity way, low risk to the business, contact the teaching team. They'll hook you up.